Just some housekeeping to get started. I'd like we don't have room for the entire board up here, so I'd like the board members who are not up here to please be in the front row here. You all should know who you are. And in case you don't know, if you want to check this out before you leave, I think I have everyone. There are a couple spots open. Oh, I did miss Daryl. Buford Jasper Housing Trust Fund by Mr. Brad Muller. Good morning, Brad, and welcome.
Good morning, Mayor. Thank you. Uh, so we came to you all last month with just some updates on some of our activities over the since we started over the last 90 plus days with the Housing Trust Fund. Again, with that update, we mentioned that we would this month put out a RFP so we can further develop that pipeline of potential funders. And so we're coming back to you again just to kind of let you know that we are still moving towards that date of our launch, which we should have it. We've got the forms here online ready to launch this week. So just kind of wanted to walk you through that. This is, for those who haven't seen yet, this is our Housing Trust Fund webpage on Community Works website. Again, it shows the each of the representatives and again, we have on that at the bottom of this page the request for proposal. Uh, One of the first things that we're asking for applicants to fill out is the letter of intent. Again, that'll give us just some initial information on their project, some initial information on their ask. And once again, once that's filled out, that will come to myself, Tammy, and a few other uh, co-workers with Community Works. And what that'll do again is just notify us that we do have some potential applicants and to be prepared for any follow-up questions. After the letter of intent, we are asking also that they fill out an application. We also have a term sheet here for them to look at as well as part of their application package. Again, we should have this out within the next few days. We will push this out to each jurisdiction along with I'll forward all the information, links as well to Victoria so she can send that out to SOLOCO members as well. And again, I'll be available um, for anyone who may have questions or concerns. If y'all come across anyone who want to apply, I have my information within the RFP for them to contact me. That's all I have as far as updates on that. If you got any questions.
Yes, please.
Yeah, two questions. If you could scroll down to it said something about max 500,000. That is going to be my second question. But my first
Yeah.
is, does this site show, are y'all bylaws finished and approved? Have you set up everything?
Yeah, so the bylaws are finished and approved. And this, again, this max 500 are just for the purposes of putting this RFP out. But again, to mention, after having those conversations with Tori and Tammy, is that we, again, are leveraging Community Works funds as well. So that way we could accept larger applications.
Okay, so on this, so you're saying so the bylaws are posted.
Yes.
And you're going to give us a site.
Yes, yes.
So is that what applicants, is the max right now what they can apply for? Is that the way I read that? The applicants?
If they request more, we'll know off that letter of intent. If they request more than that, again, we can have that conversation with them, leveraging Community Works
And
funds.
just something for later, it's just something to think about. You're
Okay.
welcome to answer it now, but are we going to have some clawback on people doing this, because it's not going to be governments that have a lot more responsibility on financials and all, but it might be a developer. As to when this is paid out, is it paid on receipt? Is it good faith? What happens for some reason if A, B, C, and D aren't abided by in order to get whatever amount? Have y'all gone through that yet?
Yeah, we're going through that process now. One of the things that we're doing now, we're connecting the board members along with the lending team from Community Works who have years of experience, and so they're with both working together. Again, they're trying to make sure they cover all of those bases. But I definitely will take that back and make sure that that's done.
Brad?
Under eligible borrowers, is there any way the municipalities and the counties should be first priority, being that it's our monies?
I can have that discussion with Latoya and them to make sure that that's part of the discussion and the requirements.
Anyone else from the board? Mayor Murray?
Off of Councilman Hamilton's question, has the
Stephen, for the sake of the recording, would you please talk into the microphone?
Brad, thanks for a great presentation. Building off of Councilman Hamilton's point, has the board set sort of a rubric or terms or metrics for how projects will be scored and sort of ranked? Because the hope is we're going to have far more interest than what we have resources for, and there'll have to be some priority. So how will they be sort of measured on location or entity or whatever it is the group has set as priorities?
So we do have, out of the committees that we've already established with the Housing Trust Fund, we have the Governance Committee, we have the Development Committee, and then part of one of those committees as well is the Project Criteria Committee. Tony, the representative with Hilton Head, along with Wendy, and we also have a few outside non-board members that's participating as well, as far as Angela Childers, to help make sure that we create that project criteria that's something that'll work, and it's something that's so I'll make sure on that that we make sure that that's important. But
as of today, it has not been done.
Yes, it has been done. We have created a set criteria list. I can send that out to you all as well. Again, just an outline of the project criteria committee, some of the outlines that they have on scoring applications, and then I'll also send out the makeup of the other committees as well.
Any other questions? Yes, Stephen, please.
Keeping the Stevens going. Just to follow up on what he was saying, I think it would be beneficial if bylaws, everything was sent to everybody on SOLOCO, because one of the questions that I have is like, what qualifies as a developer? Just because it's us moving forward with one of our projects, would we qualify as a developer since we're spurring it, or would it qualify as the person that we're contracting to do the work? And just so we can figure out how we want, because we have one that we're trying to move forward. We wanted to participate, what that process would look like, so we know how to guide that. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Brad.
Thank you all, and I'll make sure I follow up with all of the concerns and questions that's been mentioned.
Okay, and I know the city of Hardeeville has been working with the city of Bluffton, the town of Bluffton, to get a separate part of their website under the Housing Trust Fund. So we want to get your updates and all this information onto every jurisdiction who has a website designation for the trust fund. Okay? So if you could send that to Kim and Robin or me, and we'll get it on the websites.
I will.
One other question. You will let us know this information. I assume we all have some media outlets through our jurisdictions. If there's any way you want us to help you publicize let us know.
Yes, please. Yes, that's part of the process. Virginia, our communications person at Community Works, she's also putting together a press release to send
Great.
out to you all as well.
Great. Thank you, Brad. Next, Mr. Danny Lucas, who is the Director of Development Services Division in Jasper County, has been working for several months on a presentation titled The Impediments to Affordable Housing. So this is kind of timely in as we have just getting going on the Housing Trust Fund. So this could be a very timely source of information. So Mr. Lucas, thank you for putting this together, and it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you all. How can I advance these slides?
Why don't you,
There you go. That's it. Just hit the.
I thought that I would try to follow up Eric's 2.5-year effort to create the Regional Housing Trust Fund along with all of you. And by doing that, there are some impediments that get in the way, roadblocks to what it is that we are attempting to accomplish here. And I'd like to bring up some of those with a couple of solutions. But first, I must say that what I'm going to say to you this morning is my opinion, and my opinion only, does not represent a policy position of Jasper County government. So the problems that we see on a daily basis for affordable housing, as well as any other kind of housing, we suffer from a lack of housing, period. The entire country is 1 million units short based upon the aftermath of the 2008 housing crash. So we have a lack of housing. We have a lack of diverse housing. We can find developers who will go out and develop houses in the $400,000, $500,000, $800,000 range, but in an affordable housing sense, or to help the missing middle, so to speak, we have fewer developers who are willing and able to go out and do that. There's a disconnect. I certify to you, I submit to you that there's a disconnect between where the jobs are and where the people live who would then occupy those jobs. And that is one thing that it would be within our best benefit to try to solve or work on that, that disconnect. There's a certain amount of public apathy, and we found this out during the pandemic. We had all these so-called essential workers who were, it was their job to keep the country running. And they were told that they were essential, but yet they weren't respected as being essential in the sense that they were getting beat up by management and they were getting beat up by the customers. And a lot of them quit, and they have gone back into the job market even yet. So this problem of affordable housing or any kind of housing beyond high-end housing is still with us, and it's going to be with us for a while. Now, speaking of success stories, the Mossy Oaks development in Ridgeland, Farino has hit a price point, and they've been very successful with this project in the low 200s. And in fact, there are 14 or 15 of these houses, and a number of them sold sight unseen. They were bought and sold before they were finished. Some bought and sold before they were even started. So the point I'm making here is that there is a price point, whether it be for middle income housing or whether it be for affordable housing or whether it be for any other kind of housing. And it appears that Farino has been very aggressive, and they, at least in this project, they're just doing a wonderful job of it. So let's talk about some of these impediments to affordable housing. First, the amount of land that's available. And land becomes less available here in Beaufort and Jasper counties as time marches on. Then there's a matter of suitable land for affordable housing. We'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. If we're going to get affordable housing in our jurisdiction, we're going to have to be able to reduce the unit cost to the extent possible. And then there is a matter of exclusionary zoning. The first three items, at least two of them are beyond our control. The third one is within a limited control of the developer, but the fourth one is directly within the control of the governments and the jurisdictions. I'm not here to tell you that we should be getting rid of exclusionary zoning. I'm not here to tell you that at all. What I am here to tell you is that we ought to be smart with the use of exclusionary zoning. We've had exclusionary zoning in this country since 1926. And the case that is mentioned most often is Euclid Village in Ohio versus Ambler Realty. And that's why we call it exclusionary or Euclidean zoning. If we're talking about suitable land, it's one thing to have the land available, but it's another thing to call it suitable. If we're going to make it possible for people to live in our community who work in some of these lower and moderate income jobs, I would submit to you that the housing should be set up along, where possible, along the bus routes, meaning Palmetto Breeze. Also, I would suggest to you that for density purposes and infrastructure purposes, we might ought to seek developers who will develop within the municipal boundaries of Jasper and Beaufort County, meaning that there is municipal water and sewer available, basic shopping nearby, and in fact, if the lot is in fact developable. We have lots and areas here in both of our counties and others where the water table is so high that you can hardly get the land to perk. And yes, if you can get some of these to perk, the septic tank will fail at some point because it's just too wet. So here are the routes of the Palmetto Breeze bus company. Some of these routes you can see where, yeah, you could develop along that route, and the point is to give the occupant another alternative to get to the job. If we're assuming that the job is in, let's say, Hilton Head, that's part of the disconnect. The job is in Hilton Head, but some of our people live as far as Allendale, Hampton County. They're having 3-hour commutes to get to the job on Hilton Head from one way. If you look at the red line that's to the far west there, that probably would represent the least desirable area for setting up affordable housing, except and until you get inside of the city limits of Hardyville. The other ones, as long as the route takes it through the municipalities, that would sound to be a better opportunity. You can see that there is a route coming from Colleton County, Allendale, Hampton, Jasper, and Beaufort. If we're going to reduce the cost of housing, if we're going to reduce the cost of unit cost, then we must have density, economies of scale. The development that I showed you a while ago with Mossy Oaks and Ridgeland, that is in fact an infill development. So the street was already there. The water and sewer was already there. And so on a per unit cost, this makes the development less expensive than it would be if you went out on virgin land. If we're talking about exclusionary zoning, one of the problems with exclusionary zoning in many locations throughout the country is that they do not allow accessory dwelling units. And I'll get to accessory dwelling units a little bit later on. So if we're going to reduce the cost of units, we might allow or seek to allow accessory dwelling units in the backyard of single-family detached developments where practical. If we can purchase existing vacant homes, there is a fairly high stock of vacant homes in our jurisdictions. And if we could get our hands on those and rehabilitate those, or in some cases, we're not talking about much rehabilitation at all, it's just moving somebody in there. And then there is, there's vacant government land owned by cities, towns, states, and even the U.S. government within your borders. If we could get our hands on that land, then of course that takes the land costs out of the equation. So these are just some things that can be done to reduce the unit cost of development. Here's an example of an accessory dwelling unit in the backyard. You know, a lot of us are familiar with granny flats, mother-in-law suites, and some of those are detached, like this one, and some of those are attached to the master unit. In a lot of places where we have single-family detached housing, these accessory dwelling units are not allowed. But if we can look for opportunities inside of our municipalities to allow accessory dwelling units such as this, it would reduce the cost of providing affordable housing in some locations where it is in fact practical. Here's more of an outlandish example. A company called Wheelhouse out in Utah builds these wonderful units, and these all have a loft to them, and that's where you get the maximum amount of space for them. Because if you look at it just on a purely square footage, this thing is 40 feet long and 10 feet wide, but it has a loft unit to it. And this is what some of these things look like. I'm just giving you some examples of how adventurous we can be, and perhaps how adventurous we should be in trying to develop affordable housing here in our region. This one is a place called James Place Cottages. This is in Dublin, Georgia. I discovered this some years ago. The cottages are by definition a little bit larger than tiny homes, okay? But you can see here that this is a village, this is a community. It has open spaces. It has a central unit in the back. Now, actually, these were developed not for affordable housing perspectives, except that these are built for seniors. And this is how they look from the rear. I couldn't get inside to get the courtyard because they were having some sort of an affair in it, but these things have been built and they are available. So let's talk about exclusionary zoning. What I said to you in the beginning was that I'm not here to say that we ought to go back into all single-family detached districts and then shoehorn affordable housing in it. Because when you do that, all you're going to get is a fight out of that. And I don't think that we have time to fight. Most people who acquire wealth in this country acquire it through the appreciation of their house. So we can think of that as a passive income type equation. And what they don't want is something to move in that they think will, in fact, degrade the value of their house. They don't want to lose money or lose the value of their house. So what I am saying to you is that instead of getting rid of exclusionary zoning, what I am saying is that we be smart about it. What I am saying is that we ought to go and look at all of our comprehensive land use plans, because the comprehensive land use plan has a housing element in it. And to what I am suggesting is that we look inside of our comprehensive land use plans and then put a new section in there that accounts for affordable housing. That's what I'm saying. The zoning ordinance is an enforcement tool for the comprehensive land use plan. So in most jurisdictions, we have Euclidean zoning, or in fact, exclusionary zoning, that separates industrial from commercial from residential. In all these efforts, it, in fact, rules out whole populations of people in some jurisdictions. And if we're going to account for a better affordable housing scenario here, then we ought to account for it inside of the comprehensive land use plan. That's my opinion, as a separate section under housing for affordable housing. But again, I'm not telling you, I'm not suggesting that we get rid of exclusionary zoning. What I am suggesting is that where there is an opportunity, especially for new neighborhoods and new development, that in fact we use the form-based zoning process as opposed to strictly Euclidean zoning. And I'm talking about new neighborhoods only. Again, I'm not talking about going back into single-family districts and imposing some sort of quota for affordable housing. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is that if there is an opportunity in some of these districts that may be in fact single-family dwelling units to apply accessory dwelling units to get more units, again, this will be an infill development, then that is something that maybe your planners could consider for your jurisdiction and for the entire region. If Hardyville is going to grow further toward the east, and if Bluffton is going to grow further toward the west, then they're going to meet at some point at the county line. If all of our jurisdictions, the towns and cities and counties, it might be helpful, in my opinion, to apply some common language for the zoning, some common language or some common emphasis in the comprehensive land use plan. Because as you know, we've encountered and are going to encounter more of circumstances where one town is shopped against another town, is shopped against another county for development. And I'm saying to you that it's incumbent upon all of our jurisdictions to manage growth. Growth is coming no matter what, but it's our job to manage growth to the maximum extent that we can. Little town of Atherton, which is in Metro San Francisco, has a problem. It's a very wealthy enclave in San Francisco, extremely wealthy. And it was developed probably for the same reason that many other of these enclaves have been developed. That is, to give wealthy people a place to build and a place to live without having to deal with certain other kinds of developments that they don't choose to be bothered with. Some of you might recognize who this person is. This is Stephen Curry, probably the greatest shooter that's ever lived as far as basketball is concerned. You would consider him, I would consider him a very wealthy person. Well, Mr. Curry and his wife live in this town of Atherton, California. And Mr. Curry opposes an affordable housing development, which is just to the rear of his property. He doesn't oppose it according to the newspaper on principle. He opposes it because of how it would be constructed. So the town is looking to upzone, so to speak, go from strictly 1 acre lots to, in the case of the lot behind Mr. Curry's house, to be 16 dwelling units on an acre instead of 1 dwelling unit on an acre. And to do this, the developer has to build a 3-story building for multifamily. Well, if you do that, then you can peer directly out of your window into Mr. Curry's property. So can you imagine the paparazzi go up there and break off $500 or $1,000 to somebody and say, let us set up a camera and see what's going on in Mr. Curry's property? So Mr. Curry opposes the development, not on principle, but he opposes it based upon it's an intrusion on his privacy. We all know where he's going to be on a given night. You just watch him on the TV. So what is happening with his family while he is out of town? The other thing is the acreage there sells for about $8 million per acre. So I must be missing something is out of kilter in this particular story. I don't know how it is that you can make in a multifamily development affordable on a acreage that it sells for $8 million. But nevertheless, this is part of what you find when there's resistance based upon exclusionary zoning. It's not always based upon race. It's not always based upon class, but many times it's based upon one or both of the other. So what I'm saying is that when I said earlier that we should not get rid of exclusionary zoning, but we should just be as smart about it as we possibly can. So this is an example of a circumstance where on the surface, it appears that this gentleman and his family have a legitimate complaint. The other thing is, I'm not sure whether it's spot zoning or not. I don't know enough about California law to have an opinion other than the fact that I'm just suggesting that we be smart about our efforts to develop affordable housing. I mentioned that I'm not suggesting that we get into a fight in single-family detached neighborhoods and try to shoehorn affordable housing into it. I'm not suggesting that we use our affordable housing efforts here, at least not in the beginning, to solve poverty. What I would say in a selfish way is that those of us who are employers would be more apt to support a circumstance for affordable housing that targets teachers, firefighters, cops, deputies, EMTs, and public works employees, because we continue to see the growth here in the area, and we continue to see this disconnect between where people live and where they have to work. We continue to see a unsustainable circumstance where people who live in Allendale counties or Hampton County or some other place, they're having to commute 2 and 3 hours to get to a job that is at Hilton Head or even Savannah or some other place. So in order to minimize the risk, minimize the fight that would occur for the prospects of affordable housing, I'm suggesting that we go after these people first. Just a couple of weeks ago, the Jasper County Superintendent made a report to the Jasper County Council in which she outlined the fact that they have teachers who have to commute from as far away as Hampton, but even further from Florence and other places. That's unsustainable. So what I'm suggesting to you is that we create an affordable housing circumstance that encourages sustainability. The last thing I want to say here is that if at all possible, there is a process called a community land trust. I'm not talking about a real estate trust, I'm talking about a community land trust. It is a mechanism whereby a nonprofit is created to provide access to secure, affordable housing for low to moderate income households, or in our case, let's say, provide access to affordable housing for 60 to 120, 130, 140% of the area median income. A community land trust has permanent ownership of the land, which is leased to the homeowner or the renter. So we've taken out the cost of land, and now the homeowner is only charged with paying the mortgage on the structure itself. The homeowner gets a 99-year lease on the land. The homeowner owns the structure, lock, stock, and barrel. The homeowner pays property taxes every year like everybody else who has a mortgage. But it's more affordable because we've taken out one of the variables to the cost of construction and ownership, okay? Now, a community land trust has a fairly flexible structure to it, and what I would suggest is that maybe as opposed to forming a new community land trust is to join an existing land trust that is already in South Carolina. We're already close enough by so that we could tap into the resources that a community land trust might offer to our jurisdictions here in Jasper and Beaufort counties. There are pros. If you have a community land trust, because the community land trust is a nonprofit, because it owns the property or the land itself, it keeps prices from escalating out of the reach of the homeowner. The other central tenet here is that it allows the homeowner to build generational wealth through home equity. It encourages people who've been locked out of the process before to now get in to the process of building wealth, not only for themselves, but for generations to come. People that will inherit the house from them would then be able to use that equity, or the person who owns the house or the couple who owns the house can use that equity to move out of the community land trust area into another more market rate scenario, just like anybody else. Go out of a starter home into another home that's more expensive and what have you. Then, of course, the idea is to reduce delinquency and foreclosure rates. We found in 2008 and subsequently to then all sorts of scenarios that took place. And so a community land trust protects the individual homeowner from a lot of the ups and downs with home ownership in a capitalistic society. As an example, you know, and I know people who wound up with adjustable rate mortgages. Unsustainable. The balloon popped, and there they were with a rate that they could no longer pay. The community land trust protects them from that sort of adjustment or that sort of getting into stuff in which they don't have foreknowledge. Cons, the ground lease itself is confusing. The person says, oh, okay, I own the house, but you're telling me I don't own the land. It's an equity-based, appraisal-based formula, which in fact creates or caps the resale profits. So the owner of the house does not get as much equity as fast as they would have if they were in a strictly market rate situation. Then, of course, CLTs actually have to compete with other nonprofits for limited resources, grant money, foundation money, and what have you. I'd like to list here some public-private partners that mostly are probably non-standard or that you may not have thought of. I mean, who among us would have thought of Goodwill as being an agency that could help out in the sense of funding or helping to fund a community land trust? Home Depot Foundation, we're aware of Habitat for Humanity is deeply involved in affordable housing, of course. The Fuller Center for Housing, the Federal Home Loan Bank home program, which we take part in here in Beaufort and Jasper and many other counties here in South Carolina, and to a limited extent, the Community Development Block Grant is also available. There are some resources that I can point you to. The City of Bridges Community Land Trust in Pennsylvania, Palmetto Community Land Trust, which is right here in South Carolina, the Champlain Housing Trust Fund in Burlington, Vermont, the Durham Community Land Trust in Durham, North Carolina. These are all resources that we can reach out to, or that Brad and his people can reach out to, in the sense of determining more about the viability of developing or joining up with an existing community land trust. The City of Bridges Land Trust is in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, which is where Pittsburgh is. The reason why this slide is up here is because there are 130 jurisdictions inside of Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. Cities, boroughs, townships, and what have you. And they've all signed on to this idea of a community land trust inside of Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. So if 130 of these jurisdictions can sign on to an affordable housing scenario, you would think that we certainly could do it here with only 8 jurisdictions in 2 counties. I'm just suggesting to you that it's not easy, but it appears that it can be done. Now, just the other day, there's a new development in Port Royal. That's you over there, right, Van? Vivo Living Apartment Homes. They've taken out Days Inn and converted this thing into an affordable housing scenario, where the rents would go from $1,000 to $1,050 per month, would include the utilities, cable, so forth. Has laundry facilities on hand. But now, of course, it's the size of a dormitory room, about 260 square feet up to 285 square feet. But the point here is that the company out of California has taken a very nuanced but a very interesting approach to trying to provide affordable housing within Port Royal and within Beaufort County at large, because after all, you would think that this sort of thing would be quite amenable to the 2 bases that we have there close by in Beaufort County. This is just, in my view, a wonderful prospect of how and why you can take something that is basically falling apart and then turn it into something. It's basically an adaptive reuse of a hotel. Now, in conclusion, what I'd like to say is that if we don't take an aggressive approach, if we don't take an aggressive approach to affordable housing in the SOLOCO region, this young person on the left will leave the community. She's a hospitality worker, let's say, at a hotel or somewhere in the area. But she will leave the community, and others like her will leave the community. And if we don't do something about this disconnect between the jobs in Hilton Head and where people live, then we aren't going to get very far, and we might wind up killing the golden goose that is the tourist engine that we have here in South Carolina, from Horry County and Myrtle Beach all the way down to Savannah. But we might kill the golden goose here, and we might lose that accommodation tax money, the hospitality tax money, and so forth and so on. So I'm just making the point here that this is an interesting time for us, but there are some companies out there, there are some developers out there who are willing to jump in and partner with us to build affordable housing. The difference is that many of them sort of jumped out of the market when things went, when the trouble started after 2008. But the Community Land Trust is a nonprofit that typically jumps in and takes on those thorny issues that for-profit developers typically bow out of. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Danny. We're going to go right into our next presentation, and I'm going to invite Ms. Jennifer Ray, who is the Capital Improvement Plan Program Manager for Hilton Head Island.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me today. Just a brief presentation, like you've been hearing from the other municipalities and counties in our area. Let me see if I can click back. About the town of Hilton Head Island's planned capital improvements. We use our comprehensive plan, which we rewrote a couple years ago, our plan to prioritize our projects based on how these key considerations are taken into effect: quality of life, natural resources, sense of place, competitiveness in the market, and economic prosperity. We have a process that's probably very similar to yours, where we look at our carry forward projects. We go through with our community to see what they want. We balance funding and staffing. We work with the Parks and Rec Commission, our CIP committee, and the Planning Commission, and then we go to Town Council for review and decision. For FY24, we are in that space between the fourth and fifth lines there, getting ready for Town Council review and discussion. For FY23, we had $45 million of approved capital projects. We categorize our projects based on parks, roadways, fleet, facilities and equipment, pathways, beach, housing, and land acquisition. And this image shows you how they were prioritized from a dollar funding value in FY23. We have projects located all around the island. There are many other projects that aren't map specific, but this shows you the geographic distribution for FY23. I'll just show you a couple key projects. I don't want to take up a lot of your time, but I have a slide for each of our categories. It shows you the carry forward and then what we're thinking about as new projects, and just a couple images. I'll highlight things that might be of interest to the region, since that's your purview here. We are getting ready for a major beach renourishment project that will be a 2025 project, so we're continuing to work on that. We are also going to completely overhaul Islanders Beach Park and work on our parking and playground. There's an image showing you some of the amenities that we're planning there to deal with our parking issues. We are looking at some new pathway projects. Jonesville Road, you may have heard a lot about that in the news. We have just finished a feasibility study to put a new pathway the entire length of Jonesville Road. We continue to work on spot safety improvements as a community with a lot of bike and pedestrians out and about, and recently finished a pedestrian bridge in the lower right corner at Shelter Cove Community Park. It connects Veterans Park to the community park. Under roadways, we continue to pave dirt roads. We are also working on a major project to look at all of our corridors and major thoroughfares, building off of the William Hilton Parkway Gateway Corridor project. We are looking at the rest of William Hilton Parkway, Pope Avenue, Palmetto Bay Road, and Arrow Road. We are underway for an adaptive traffic signal project where all of the signals on the island will be converted to an adaptive traffic signal, which will be great for traffic coming onto the island because it'll help move traffic around the island much better. We're working closely with Beaufort County on that with hopes that they will take the same vendor and apply it to the mainland. Also working on a couple road and intersection, smaller scale projects on the island. From a park standpoint, we have several parks that haven't had the attention that they have needed in several years. So we're kind of in a catch-up, cleanup mode for Chaplain Community Park and Crossings Park, two of our oldest parks on the island. We've also have plans approved for the Mid-Island Tract, a 100-acre park, Mid-Island, that will serve as a regional destination. From a facilities and equipment, that's probably our category, like many of you, that has the most number of projects. It's not the most dollar amount, but this is everything from taking care of our buildings. We have some major stormwater projects that are continuing on. We are working on our town hall and training center, as well as several fire rescue projects. And then fleet management, we always have to take care. And I think this is really cool, building the fire apparatus. It's a 3 or 4 year project, but the team gets to go and see the apparatus in all stages of development. And then we are slowly transitioning to electric vehicles for our fleet. We continue to have projects for land acquisition and housing. You obviously have heard a lot about that today, and we're working on a partnership for the North Point development, which is there adjacent to the post office on the north end of the island. We have a very robust hub and dashboard on the town's website under major initiatives that I encourage anyone that's interested in learning more about our projects to go to. You can drill down as far as you want to learn more about that. And I have my contact info, so if you have any specifics about Hilton Head Island projects, I'd be happy to share with you.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. And Mayor, please.
What are self-cleaning screens? That was on your slide with the training.
Right, for the stormwater, it's a way that the debris can not get clogged up after a storm.
But where are they? Where
For stormwater?
No, so screens for ground, not like a screen on a window.
Right, not a screen on the window. It's for stormwater. So when the debris comes through, there's a way that instead of someone having to go out and clean that out, that the screens can self-clean.
Like Jarvis Park.
Yes, ma'am. Yep. Jarvis Park, Wexford, Lawton Station. We have several pump stations, and we're working on upgrading to those screens.
Great.
Thank you.
Jennifer. Depending on the time, I will open up to any questions to either Jennifer or to Danny. But what I'd like to do next is discuss the agenda items going forward. And I want to turn over to Chairman Passaman to introduce some ideas that he would like to share with the group and get some input as to whether or not we want to pursue this in the future. So, Chairman Passaman,
Yes.
the floor is yours.
I've been a member of SOLOCO for a period of time, and SOLOCO has done some wonderful things. 3 things specifically, several of which were award-winning. Stormwater. We put together a stormwater plan for our counties. The Housing Trust Fund. We are now finalizing, after many years, impact fees. So what's the next big thing that we need to do? Recently, I was in Washington, D.C. with 27 people representing 7 counties in our region. Now, we always talk about in SOLOCO 2 counties and a bunch of municipalities. We are bigger than that. What happens in Jasper County and Beaufort County affects other counties around us. SCA put together 27 people to go to Washington, D.C. to talk about our wants and needs and how the federal government can supply us with funds to accomplish that. We're talking about not only our 4 counties in our region, but we add in Allendale, Barnwell, and Bamberg counties. So what's the next big thing? Well, we've sat with them, and as a result of our meeting in Washington, D.C., to say, what do we have in common? What do we need to do to move forward? What are the assets that you have? What are the needs that you have? And how can we combine to leverage additional funds? So next month, we are going to have a meeting with those 7 county leaderships to make plans about what do we do? What's the next big thing that we can do together? So what I would like to do is what's the next big thing that SOLOCO can do for our region right here? 3 words that I have made my mantra and our motto: live, work, and play. We talked about live today, housing at all levels. We want to talk about work. The next thing is work. Where do people have jobs? Well, certainly they would like to have a job near where they live. We have some disconnects there. We heard from Danny about people coming an hour and a half, 2 hours to where they work from where they live. It's not sustainable forever. People do that at the beginning because that's the only place they could get a job. How do we address that for the future? I have taken a look 20 years into the future as to what I believe this county is going to look like and what Jasper County is going to look like. And if we don't do anything about it, shame on us, because it is going to happen. Play. Well, we learned a valuable lesson during COVID in that when people were pent up, they had some place they had to go. And we found out it was our parks. And they let us know the good, the bad, and the ugly about the park system that we have. So I am proposing that we, as a group, come together. We do some great things. I heard in a meeting this morning about a presentation that was done to all of the county managers all over the county. They get together on a regular basis because they have the day-to-day operations. I know that our mayors get together on a regular basis to talk about some of the things they need. I want to take that to the next level and see what we as the county can do to have that partnership with you, to do what is right. You hear about our CIP plans. We have a vision moving forward of what we believe we should do. So that's where I'm coming from, that these are the next things we have to talk about. Thank you, Mayor.
So Joe, do you have a specific agenda item that you would like for us to schedule?
Yeah. One of the big things right now is the fact that there are several facilities that are lacking in our region, one of which is regional detention centers. I think that is one thing that is solvable. We know that there is a very, very need for staffing of those, and that we're always constantly taking each other's staff for a detention center. I also know that several of our counties are in litigation over our detention centers. Unknowingly, they were built a certain way that do not meet the needs right now. And it is a lawsuit that we are under because of the way they were constructed. To reconstruct them would be monumental in cost. So therefore, maybe we do a regional detention center where we all can participate in that. So that's one of the ideas. I have several others that, I could bring forward.
So what I'll do, so we don't keep everybody, I'll be in contact with you, and you'll give me a specific topic that you want to share, who will present it, and a time frame as we usually do, so that you can project your idea to the region.
Will do.
But your point about finding the next big thing for Soloco is a good one, whatever that may be. Yes, Mayor.
And then I don't want to lose back. Oh, it's on now. Ed, we're an educational group. Let's remember that, because something like that has never been in a budget for a municipality. So I like understanding it, but I really think something we all can put our hands around, and Danny mentioned it a little bit, is, and I wish Eric didn't run out on a call, is the overall, are we on the same page with zoning? Because a lot of things he said, I know Bluffton does, with affordable housing, but I also know Bluffton is so out of whack with multifamily compared to the county. That's just one, because we see it a lot where we blur into a town in Beaufort County. I'm sure Hardyville that blurs into Jasper County. I just think we're out of whack on that, and I felt like Eric was on board. I don't know how Jasper County is, but it's just that is something we can really have an impact on.
So those zoning differences, because I know the group discussed that before as a future agenda item, so that.
And I
that
got a head shake from Kevin, so.
Okay, so, all right, we got out approval. There's also, and we have 5 minutes, so there's also one that I'd also like to bring up as a potential conversation of this group, and perhaps as a region, we can have an impact. In talking to some first responders and some doctors recently, our region faces a critical shortage of primary care physicians, other physicians as well. Also, a first responder, former policeman, suggested to me that with this growing population, and I get a text every day about an accident, that we as a region do not have a trauma center, that every one of our trauma patients have to go to either Savannah or Charleston, and that perhaps that would be something as a region we can explore. So one of my suggestions for the board is in the future to call in the CEOs of the hospitals. We have Russell Baxley, Joel Taylor, and for Coastal Carolina is Ryan Lee. So we could bring those in, ask them if they could explain the problem, and see what we as a group could do to help solve that problem. Is that something that you would be interested in?
Yeah, I wouldn't discount St. Joe Candler.
On St. Joe, good, thank you.
And MUSC is partnering with so many of our hospitals. I don't know how we could get, that could be a week-long presentation, but I'd definitely include them. And, I watch y'all's meetings and you had a public comment on just that, Mayor Perry, on the lack of ability to get doctors with all the growth we are seeing.
Yeah, so really the bigger issue for us right now is the nursing side. We met with Joel Taylor the other day, and they're down 46 nurses. So one of the recommendations that we brought out was, since we've got such a retired community, large retired community, and there are probably a lot of nurses within there, the chamber is going to actually start a program to start to court those retired individuals to come out, work 1-2 days a week in the hospital to help ease that situation. For us right now, that's first and foremost is the nursing side, because the hospital doesn't have the capacity. So as we look to having a discussion about a trauma center, then we also look, how's that going to affect, especially us on the island, with our medical staff and support staff. How's that going to be pulled out and reduce those numbers? So that's a huge conversation that we're having and looking into in a multitude of ways.
Yes.
Being from Sun City about that, part of the problem we should look at is when a nurse comes down here, they're certified in South Carolina. I mean, I've tried to get a few people to volunteer in my neighborhood, and the process of going through the certification, they don't want to do. I mean, so maybe we should look at going to the delegations and saying, can we do something for part-time people? I mean, if they're full-time, that's one thing, but if they're part-time helping out, maybe there's a different level.
I think there is, and I think actually USCB with their nursing program can help out with that. We did have those conversations, and there's also tech positions that they could go into that don't have to have those nursing license updated or adjusted to meet the local codes.
Which goes back to education.
Right.
You know, I don't know that.
Yeah.
Well, I think that these are all discussions that we should have when we put this on the agenda. But it seems that there's a lot of interest and information that we could all benefit as a group. I'm going to entertain one other comment from Mayor Murray before we close the meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I would certainly support a healthcare conversation. The city's been pushing in with Beaufort County and Beaufort Memorial Hospital. The good news is a partnership, building a sim lab over at hospital administration. We're going to double the capacity of nurses that USCB is putting out, again, all working together. So I think there's greater opportunity to figure out some of those strategies. I want to thank Mr. Lucas for a really great presentation, but as a suggestion for something we might tackle together in the future, the Housing Trust is a really great start. But I think to Mr. Lucas's point about some of our zoning, some of our regulations, you know, I just found that it's taken months for someone to get approval for a single family home working at the city of Beaufort. And I think we can do, in our house, I think we can do a little better to get people in and out if they're going to build workforce housing, figure out how we can reduce and maybe even incentivize some of those folks so that the private sector takes on a greater role. So maybe there's an opportunity for us to, you know, look at a consultant or have some of our staffs come in, talk about how we're each working together to incentivize workforce housing from a regulatory and process zoning standpoint, not just throw in sort of public money at the housing issue. Thank you.
I think what I'll try to do is for this zoning issue, I'm going to, maybe a small group of us can get together and advise the board on how we can structure this agenda, who should give it, and, you know, should we do it? All these questions on how to structure this agenda would be, maybe we'd get a small group together. Fred, is it?
I also want to thank Mr. Lucas for a wonderful presentation. His presentation is something we paid a lot of money for. 'Cause we've been researching and paying consultants for that kind of information, and you offer it to us free. I'd like to have a copy of your presentation, please. Thank you.
Raise your prices, Danny. Okay, thank you, everybody. I'll get together. There's several ideas for next month's agenda. I will also, so we can continue to go through each jurisdiction's CIP, I'll reach out to the ones who haven't presented yet to we'll get one each month till we complete the process, okay? Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next month in Bluffton on the 4th Tuesday. Thank you. Have a nice Easter, everyone.